The Saturn V rocket that would carry the crew of Apollo 17 to the moon inched its way to the launch pad as last-minute preparations were being made for the final lunar flight of the Apollo program. The 5 successful moon landings that preceded Apollo 17 were all crewed by test pilot astronauts trained in science. Apollo 17 was to be the last opportunity for a true scientist to set foot on the lunar surface. Apollo 17 is a story of humanity's need to understand its place in the universe. For the first time, this program presents the recollections of this historic mission as told by all 3 of the crew members, as well as their thoughts on the future of humanity in space.
Once we had gone to the moon and returned it 2 or 3 times, and within the Nixon administration and within Congress, the political center of mass just began to shift away from the Cold War, from the other kinds of things. Let's get out of Vietnam. It was a big issue at the time. Most, if not all, of my colleagues during the Apollo program did not imagine that we would throw away the capabilities that we had developed to go to the moon and to do other things in space as rapidly as we did.
We had planned through Apollo 20. We had the hardware to do it, and we had the people in place to lay the plans necessary to do those flights. And as we got near the end of Apollo, I mean, or maybe in the middle of Apollo, I think the NASA management recognized that they needed a portion of the NASA effort to start doing other things. And so I think they evaluated that in their mind. They talked with the scientists and compromised between what people wanted done on Apollo as opposed to what people wanted done in other places in the solar system. Indeed, the mission that I was originally in line for, Apollo 18, had been canceled during the Apollo 15 training cycle. And so from the point of view of many of the astronauts, and the handwriting was on the wall, that the Apollo program was indeed winding down, that Apollo 15, 16, and 17 would be the last intensive scientific effort to explore the moon for the foreseeable future. And we were all well aware of that. Well, nobody got everything they wanted, but I think most people got a reasonable compromise. People were very unhappy when we didn't fly more 18, 19, and 20 in the science community, and rightfully so. We had the hardware to do it, we just didn't have the resources to do it. My presence on Apollo 17 was a consequence of media pressure, I think, on NASA, a feeling by many of the managers of NASA that indeed we should not terminate the Apollo program without putting the scientists on the moon. Once that decision had been made, it was also clear that the Taurus-Littrow Valley was an extremely challenging geological site and would not only tax my capabilities, but those of anyone else that might have flown.
We hope that, geologically speaking, we'll be able to uncover rock types and different types of geologic finds that date back from the very beginning of the moon's history, to the present time. And of course, the major objective here scientifically is to be better able to understand our own Earth, our own evolution of life as our Earth knows it, our own environment, and maybe better predict what has happened and what might happen in the future concerning civilization here on Earth.
Obviously, I'm enthusiastic about the total potential of the site to look into the 2 major questions, that is, understanding the Earth better through the moon and its early history, and understanding the sun better through the exposure of its soils to the sun, And then, of course, there's this other thing of the unexpected, and who knows what that's going to be. And that's really what makes it exciting.
The toughest job Deke had was taking somebody off of Apollo 17 and putting Jack Schmitt on. Because he was just flat out told that he had to fly a geologist on that last flight. I think that was the right thing to do, but it's a tough thing to do as a manager of astronauts. When you have one guy already assigned and you have to take him off and put somebody else on. But I think it turned out to be absolutely the right thing to do, and I think that's what spaceflight today ought to be all about. Putting the scientist up there to let him do his thing.
I joined the Apollo program to go to the moon, to help train astronauts and to do something that I thought was extremely important for the country as well as for science. And this gave me an opportunity to put my life where my mouth was. And indeed, I don't have any regrets about the way it played out and what we were able to do on Apollo 17.
And then you go on out and you get inside of the spacecraft, and then they do a few checkouts and a few things like that, and they close the hatch, and then you have a chance to kind of sit there and start thinking. Here I am on top of a rocket that's as tall as a 36-story building, and down inside that rocket there is 4.5 million pounds of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, and kerosene. I'll tell you what, if your heart doesn't go pitty-pat, pitty-pat, just a little bit faster than normal, you don't understand the potential problems.
During launch, there's really very little they can do except for just strap in and ride it, you know. So it was very nervous making for them. I mean, like the heart rate that they monitored in mission control, I mean, like almost invariably showed higher heart rate during launch than at any other portion of the flight, including when they would land on the moon. Because when they're landing, they're driving it. You know, when they're blasting off, they're just sitting there. And they were as scared as they ever got.
Have been pressurized. Now past the 1 minute mark, and we are going on internal power. Now all systems to internal power. We'll be looking for the engine start sequence at the 8.9 second mark in the countdown. The engines will build up to a thrust of 7.6 million pounds. T-minus 30 seconds. We have a cutoff. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds. We're standing by at T-minus 30 second mark. We'll bring word to you just as soon as we get it. We have a cutoff at T-minus 30 seconds.
The problem turned out to be a launch computer wiring problem, the hardware problem, where one of the oxygen tanks had not pressurized in response to a signal from the launch computer. In fact, the signal was not sent. Somebody saw that the tank had not pressurized, and they manually pressurized it. So we were ready to go. We could have gone. But the computer didn't know that.
Taken by the crew aboard the space vehicle. Now approaching the half-minute mark.
It probably took most of the time to convince NASA management that indeed they knew the problem, they fixed it, and we were ready to go. So within 2 hours and 40 minutes from the hold, we were on our way and headed outbound on a Saturn V rocket.
Final guidance release. We'll expect engine ignition at 8.9 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition. 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff, and it's lighting up the area. It's just like daylight here at Kennedy Space Center as the Saturn V is moving off the pad. It has now cleared the tower.
Tower, y'all complete. We're in a roll, Bob.
Roger, Gino, looking great. Thrust good on all 5 engines.
When the booster lit up and when the light went across the horizon was
was like the universe lit up from without. All the fish and all the everything that was in a pond apparently at that point in time just leaped out of the water instantaneously when a light came across, and then of course then that rumbling Saturn V sound a second later came roaring across the crowd. And let me tell you, it was a roar inside. I could literally see through the only window we had the reflection of that tremendous amount of effective sunlight as I looked straight up out the window.
And then the old rocket starts going up in the air and accelerating, and you're on top of that old thing, and it's shaking and vibrating and banging away, you know, and then you're going faster and faster and faster, and as it accelerates and it's still shaking, and then it starts pushing you back into the seat until 2 minutes and 10 seconds into the flight, you've got 4.5 G's or 4.5 times your own weight pushing you back down into the seat, and it's shaking and bang, 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 and then bang, the engine quits. And then the first stage drops off, and then the second stage ignites. And again, you have 5 big rocket engines on there, but you're above most of the Earth's atmosphere, and all the vibration and shaking stops. And it's a nice, smooth ride.
Guys, I've got the word you wanted to hear. You are go for TLI. You're go for the moon.
Oh, I do not remember any problems in Earth orbit as far as I can recall. Everything was checking out beautifully. We did our 2 orbits, reignited the S-4B, the 3rd stage of the Saturn V over Australia, and accelerated from 18,000 miles an hour to 25,000 miles an hour in a perfect burn, and we were on our way. We hardly needed any, in fact, we didn't need any mid-course corrections all the way out.
When you get to this point, you realize that something strange has happened. This is a strange and yet familiar sight. And a horizon then bends around upon itself and closes in upon itself. And this is where you begin to see sunrises and sunsets happen before your very eyes rather than flying through them as you do in Earth orbit.
When you're leaving that Earth at 25,000 miles an hour, within just 20 minutes, that relatively flat Earth transitions down to a little ball that you can see out through an 8-inch window. Man, oh man, what a sight that is.
Our next task, of course, was to pick up the lunar module from its storage place in the end of the Saturn V, and that went without a hitch. Ron flew a perfect docking maneuver with it.
I remember after we were on our way in Apollo 17, Mission Control said, you're on your way, you're right on target. As it should have been, we had little or no problems. The problems were all taken up by the time we got to Apollo 17. The only problems we had were the fact that Ron Evans lost his scissors, and without your scissors in space, you can't eat, you can do little or nothing. And that was probably the major problem we had.
Ron Evans was on watch that third night, and they couldn't wake him up. He was a very deep sleeper. They tried everything, and we didn't realize what had happened until I had rolled over or rotated in my sleeping bag and saw that the master alarm light was on. The ground had put it on. They couldn't turn it off, and I reached up just to turn it off and then to begin to find out what was wrong. And it was very, very hot, so it obviously had been on for some time. And that's when we started to wake up and realized Ron was over there snoring away and totally oblivious. We had to shake him to wake him up.
And we're gonna head out to someplace we can't see. We were landing in the very eastern edge of the moon, therefore it was not lit when we started. It was like a new moon. So we really couldn't see where we were going, and we were headed out at 25,000 miles an hour to rendezvous with a target we couldn't see 3 days later, and we were going to miss it by 50 miles. And I just called back. I said, he said, you're right on target. You're going to miss the moon by 50 miles. And I said, God, I hope you're right.
This is Apollo Control, 89 hours, 15 minutes ground elapsed time. Some 55 seconds until Apollo 17 comes from behind the moon on the start of the first lunar orbit. The ignition time was 88:54:21 in ground elapsed time.
On this particular case, you go by the side of the moon and you light the engine off, and if the engine burns too long, that means you slow down too much. You go along the side of the moon and it goes whoop, hits the back side of the moon. Not too good for the astronaut, see? Or if you're going along the side of the moon, your engine fires, but it doesn't fire long enough, then it slows you down a little bit, but not enough, and you go swing, skipping off into space. A little bit of curve, so you're going that way and the Earth's back over here. Not too good again. So you burn the engine exactly right, and you end up going into an orbit around the moon.
Craters are craters are craters. And there are nothing but craters on the moon. And some of them are several thousand feet big, and some of them are several inches big. And when you're coming down on the moon to land, you can't tell how big that crater is. You don't know whether it's 100 feet, 10 feet, 2 feet, because you don't have any reference. That's the reason we wanted the sun angle we wanted when we landed on it. Because if you get the sun angle right, then you get some definition, you get some depth perception.
Oh man, we're level with the top of the machine now. Okay, stand by for pitch over. Oh, are we coming in? Picture is proceeded. And there it is, Houston, there's Camelot. Wide on target. I see it. We got them all. 42 degrees, 37 degrees, through 5,500.
We landed in a valley. Not a large valley, but the valley of Taurus Littrow, northeastern edge of the moon. We had to launch at night, by the way, in the month of December in 1972 in order to get the shadows where we wanted them during landing. That valley was a valley about 20 miles across, surrounded by mountains that were higher than the Grand Canyon of Arizona is deep. So when we pitched over at 7,000 feet, I think I made a comment at that time, again, that we were really down among them, and you really were, because all of a sudden you could see these mountains rise out of your peripheral vision on the sides of the mountains. And that's when that dream of yours began to become a reality. That's when you really realized what was happening and where you were headed.
Very little dust. Stand by for touchdown. Stand by. 25 feet. Down at 2. Feels good. 20 feet. Going down at 2. 10 feet. 10 feet. Contact. Stop push. Engine stop. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
Roger, Challenger, that's super.
Houston, you can tell America that Challenger is at Taurus Littrow. As I step off at the surface at Taurus Littrow, we'd like to dedicate the first steps of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible. That's what it looks like. It's waving in a breeze. Yes, sir. How about right there?
We got a beautiful picture, you guys, up down there.
Let me tell you, Bob, this flag is a beautiful picture. Houston, that's beautiful. This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you.
The Apollo 17 science plan included in the first day a deployment of a much more complicated science package, or ALSEP, than any of the other missions. So we had a new set of experiments. Some of them were fairly complicated in deployment. We again had the heat flow drilling to do, as well as to get some cores from those heat flow drill holes.
I'm going to get this thing out. No, I got it.
Boy, you know what you call getting down into your work.
And we had some problems, particularly with what was called a long-period gravimeter, our gravity meter that was a special experiment designed to sense gravity waves if they came by and excited the moon's free oscillation. That one was not properly designed, put together, and we didn't know it at the time. So we spent a lot of our first EVA time trying to get that encaged.
Let's see if I can't crash the corner and get that contact. See if I can't get her.
Look at the boulders out there.
I was strolling on the moon one day in the merry month of December. May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month.
You can't tell distance or size on a surface of the moon. You have nothing relatively to judge distance by except the lunar module itself. And when you take that rover and you drive 15 or 20 kilometers away and go over the hills and around a bend, it's very difficult to find it in the first place, much less use it to judge distance or time.
There's nothing on the moon. You know, there is no way to tell how far away anything is. I mean, everybody had an incredibly difficult time finding their way around. Later on, when they were taking the rover out there, they were getting lost. You know, I mean, like they had to be very careful about where they were going because they couldn't tell, you know. You can't look around. Plus, the place is small. The moon's a lot smaller, you know, to where, like, the angle, you know, I mean, like, the horizon is much closer. So it's a hard place to find your way around, I would think, you know. And I can imagine getting lost.
Oh, hey! There is orange soil. Well, don't move it till I see it. It's all over. Orange. Don't move it till I see it. I've stirred it up with my feet. Hey, it is! I can see it from here. It's orange.
That's the volcanic mix.
Somebody unplugged silver.
Fantastic, sports fans.
Second excursion and the third excursion that we had were really textbooks in terms of productivity, of where we followed the plan that we had very, very closely. We were able to deviate from the plan because we kept building up some reserves of time until we hit Station 4 where we found the orange soil. That was unexpected, of course, as are most discoveries. And we immediately went to work, even without waiting for the ground, to figure out what we ought to do because we knew what we had to do. And in half an hour, we probably had the most productive 30 minutes of any Apollo mission in sampling and gaining the information necessary to really understand that orange soil.
Light gray material on either side. Oh man, that's incredible. Say, Gene, we're going to have to, that's incredible. You need to get a down sun color.
The scientists were looking for the oldest rock that they could possibly get back from the lunar surface. So they wanted to date the place as well as the rocks being a sort of a history of what's happened to the moon during its geology.
It turns out it came from very deep within the moon, probably as deep as 500 kilometers. Has given us insights into the evolution of the moon as a small planet, as well as, I think, tells us whether or not the moon was captured or was derived by a Mars-sized impact on the Earth. Indeed, I think it tells us it was captured.
There isn't enough time, Tony, to do it, no matter which way you want to do it. We need more time. We may have to flip. Let's flip 5 in a little bit.
He's getting about 3 centimeters of lag.
They got to leave at a certain time regardless of what we got. Willing to give up all the light mantle stuff.
I mean, every astronaut you sent up there wanted to extend the time out doing EVA or extend the time on the lunar surface or extend the time running some test. That's the perfectionist in all of them, I think. They wanted to do it better and better and better, or to get more and more data that would do the job better.
Holy smoly! Why are we on a slope? You okay?
Well, man, that's rough country in there, isn't it?
Well, you're looking across Henry.
Yeah.
All geologists like to go to areas that have never been explored before. We try to do that as young geologists on Earth all the time. If you can't go to an area that's never been explored before you go to a problem that nobody's ever worked on before. That's just the excitement of science. That's what you always try to do. Nobody's been able to top my field area, and it'll be some time before they do. I suspect until a geologist, paleontologist gets out on the surface of Mars and begins to search for those fossils that I'm almost certain are there, they won't have a chance to top what we did on Apollo 17.
I remember one of the questions I got asked by the press over and over again. They'd always say, well, are these the best astronauts we've ever had flying? How do they compare with the guys that went before? And I would always answer that saying, the two guys we got up there, the best we've ever flown. Because they've learned from all of the mistakes of everybody else. They learned from the experiences from everybody else, and therefore they are bound to be the best trained and the best astronauts we've ever flown. And I think that is a true statement.
I have the privilege of being the only guy to have a wreck 250,000 miles away from the nearest car. I knocked the back part of that fender off, and we lost it somewhere. Well, I guess I did bring it back. I think it's in the Smithsonian now. We did find it, but we couldn't put it back on. And the lunar dust was a tremendous problem. The dust would come up over the top, and we tried to drive without that fender, and it was like driving in a dust storm. We had to some way build a fender to keep that dust from coming over on us and on all of our equipment. John devised this fender here on Earth and passed the word up, and we used a couple camera clips we had, and to be honest with you, being an aviator first and a geologist second, I found no better use for 2 geology maps.
The third EVA, third excursion, took us over to the big boulder at Station 6. Spectacular shots, still footage was taken, as well as some movie footage. And there we learned even more about the enormous amount of energy that's involved in the formation of these large basins. We were at the rim of the Serenitatis Basin, 500 kilometers in diameter, tremendous energy, melting of rocks and things like that. And that big boulder was a good type example of what happens when these immense collisions occur.
It's a rock composed of many fragments of many sizes and many shapes. When we return this rock, or some of the others like it, to Houston, we'd like to share a piece of this rock with so many of the countries throughout the world. We hope that this will be a symbol of what our feelings are, what the feelings of the Apollo program are, and a symbol of mankind that we can live in peace and harmony in the future.
Cernan said a lot of energy. Eugene Cernan is a very articulate man, and was the absolute right person to be the last man on the moon, you know, because, like, he really closed it off well, you know. I mean, he said good things, he did good things, he has good, smart memories, you know. I mean, like, he speaks well of the entire expedition, not just his flight, you know. I mean, he was a good person to have been the last man on the moon.
To commemorate not just Apollo 17's visit to the Valley of Torres Litro, but as an everlasting commemoration of what the real meaning of Apollo is to the world, we'd like to uncover a plaque that has been on the leg of our spacecraft that we have climbed down many times over the last 3 days. And I'll read what that plaque says to you. The words are, "Here man completed his first exploration of the moon, December 1972 AD. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind."
NASA was very safety conscious. Every system was double redundant. They had 3 of something, you know, I mean, but they only had 1 engine to take off. And so they made the simplest engine they could build. You know, I mean, it was a very simple and straightforward engine, and you turned it off and it went on, hopefully.
Econ. Surgeon. GNC.
Guidance, you happy?
Go.
Fido. Go.
AFD. We don't have an AFD. LFAO. That'll work. Recovery. Capcom or go for liftoff.
I want to get something squared away very, very quickly. No one will ever forget, and of course we've been reminded over and over again, Neil's first words on the surface of the moon. But not many people remember man's last words on the surface of the moon. Just in case any of you played Trivia Pursuit, so you do have the right answer, I'm going to give you those words right now. We were sitting in the lunar module about 20 seconds before liftoff, and I looked over at Jack and I said, Jack, let's get this mother out of here.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Right our way, Houston. Vector good. Ag thought. Over. Roger, you have good thrust. 130 Houston, we're in the blind and we're go. Roger, we'd like the Ags to auto. Challenger Houston, we'd like to terminate ascent feed now. Okay. Houston, 540 Challenger's coming through 52K and ping says 126 on the HVAC. We're go. Roger, Challenger, your trajectory is right on the money. Both systems are go. Okay, normal shutdown and normal trim procedures. Roger, normal shutdown, normal trim. Looks like you've been flying well up there, partner. The spacecraft looks good. You betcha.
Man module pilot is the one who's basically in charge. The lunar module is passive, and the guy comes in and docks with them and takes them home. And that's a very difficult rendezvous and docking. And the two pilots of the two ships have to know each other pretty well.
Jack Schmitt, who tended or wanted to be a comedian a number of times, when we opened our hatch to go into the lunar module, Ron's hatch wasn't open, and Jack had something up his sleeve and was one up by Ron because he just went knock, knock, knock. Of course, we were talking to each other through comm. He went knock, 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 and Ron Evans says, "Who's there?"
And when they opened the hatch, you know, those guys have been down there walling around in that very, very fine lunar dust. And when they opened the hatch, this dust just kind of flowed or filtered, infiltrated my nice, clean spacecraft. You know, all those rocks and everything else came across there. And man, were they dirty.
Houston, America has found some fair winds and following seas, and we're on our way home. Hey, this is great. Talk about being a spaceman. This is it.
The EVA is primarily designed, first of all, to retrieve the film that's back in the sim bay. The two cameras, the pan camera and the mapping camera, of course, have film cassettes. The lunar sounder, its basic information is recorded on film. These cassettes are in the sim bay, and of course, the only piece of the whole booster that comes back into the Earth's atmosphere as it lands is only that little command module up on the top. So somehow we've got to get the film cassettes back into the command module, and that's the purpose of the EVA.
And when I was coming back in the third time, as I mentioned, I finally looked down, and would you believe, right there where that sun was shining on the spacecraft, painted down there below the hatch, was an American flag. And below that flag, it said, again painted in there, United States of America. Could not help but pause and reflect for a moment that your nation, my nation, through our endeavors and accomplishments in space, during that period of time, created an unprecedented prestige in the eyes of the rest of the world. So you come in exactly 6 degrees down, and you come in at 6 degrees down, and then when you get down to 300,000 feet above the Earth, that's when you start feeling the friction of the atmosphere, and I have a little G meter inside the spacecraft, and it reads 0.05 G, 500th G. That's the signal, hey Gene, hang on, something's going to happen. And does it ever? Very, very rapidly from 500ths of a G in just 35 seconds time, you've got 7 Gs pushing you back down into the seat on the spacecraft. You know, it starts pushing you back down in there, and then the spacecraft, due to this aerodynamic friction and whatever, it starts to skip back out into space. So before it goes from 7 Gs back up to 4 Gs, you got to turn it upside down, make it dig back into the Earth's atmosphere. So it goes, come on down, come on down, come on down. And then you have 4 Gs, and then down to 3 Gs, and then down to 2 Gs, and then 1 G, and it starts to tumble and flop around. And then you get down to 25,000 feet, boom, a drone parachute's come out. The only thing we've got left to do now is to hit the water. So I had an altimeter in the spacecraft, and as you get close to the water, I started calling off the altitude. And we got down to 500 feet, 400 feet, 300 feet, boom, we hit the water. The altimeter was wrong.
One aspect for young people to remember with Apollo is that there were about 450,000 individuals involved in Apollo. I don't know of a single one of those individuals who did not believe that what they were doing at that time was the most important thing they could do with their lives. And as a consequence, you did indeed get 16, 18-hour days, 8-day weeks out of these individuals. And they did it willingly.
What is the one thing in the last decade that has increased the esteem of our nation, the United States, in the eyes of the rest of the world? The one thing has been our participation in the space program. The whole world looks to the United States to lead, to go their accomplishments in the space program. And to me, that's a very, very important thing.
So all in all, the Apollo 17 mission scientifically was extraordinarily productive. It added the most samples to any mission had collected, 250 pounds, to the 600 pounds that had been collected by previous missions. And from those samples and all the missions put together, we indeed developed a first-order understanding of the Moon as a planet and its history as a small planet, something that is no mean accomplishment for a program even the size of Apollo.
What really matters about Apollo is those were the first people to leave the Earth, to go anywhere. You know, in the next 500 years, if we don't destroy ourselves, who knows where we'll go? You know, I mean, there's a whole universe out there waiting for us. But that was the first time human beings left the Earth. And historically, I think that's the way history is going to look back at these flights. It's not that they landed on the moon, but that they left the Earth.
Some historian will probably try to put together a story that Apollo, particularly the early years of Apollo, had a great deal to do with this country surviving the experience of Vietnam, in that it did offer something positive on the evening news at a time when almost everything else was negative. And it wasn't just Vietnam. Obviously, the civil rights crises that were occurring in the nation. It was a very traumatic time politically and sociologically for the United States of America as well as for the world. And Apollo was indeed a very positive as well as a very exciting thing happening that served to dilute the impact of those otherwise traumatic events. I think I feel very strongly about that, have written and spoken about it, and I think actual historians will discover that fact sometime in the future.
I think we contributed a great deal to the outlook of the country, and there's no question we contributed tremendously to the technological advantage that the country had in the 70s based on the technology we developed in the 60s. I mean, just the communication satellite by itself has changed the whole face of the Earth in a very, very short time. The world is no longer anywhere near the same place as it was. And now look at the computer. And the computer is unbelievable. Materials, unbelievable. The ability of doctors to determine what's going on in the body through instrumentation all had its nucleus in the space program.
I don't see exploring space as ignoring earthly problems, so much as it's a different way to grow. You know, we have to grow our way out of our problems. And that's a very serious way to grow. You know, you learn a lot doing it. You learn a lot about yourself doing it. You learn a lot about the planet you just left, you know. And I think that's important. It can all be useful to the growing experience of the human race. I think if we don't self-destruct, that we're going to go out there. You know, I mean, it's the nature of evolution to explore wherever you can. I mean, to where like every life form spreads its territory as far as it can. You know, and the human race is the first earthly life form that's been able to go anywhere else.
It was very risky, very difficult, very expensive to go to the moon the way we did in Apollo. And I think the next time we go, we want it to be not as risky, we want it to be not as costly, we want it to be, the risk to be very, very limited in terms of safety. And we want to be able to stay there a long time, take advantage of the people we send, because I'm sure we'll send a bunch of scientists as well as astronauts there.
What Apollo has done has taken men from the environment in which they evolved and put them in an environment that is orders of magnitude different than any environment that that we know of has ever existed. And this has to be considered an evolutionary step. I think it's that mankind will continue that evolution, will continue to explore and challenge himself on this Earth's frontier. And we're going to start to do what was done in the days of the West after the mountain men and after the Army explorers. We're starting to put the farmers and the miners, the practical utilizers of space, into space.
That if you're going to live off the planet Earth permanently, you cannot always import your life materials from the Earth. You must learn to live off the land in the same way that the pioneers who expanded westward lived off the land. That implies you must learn to use resources in space, and planets are the place where there are resources. So then the question is, what are the resources and how do you use them? And the moon is not a particularly good place for resources. It lacks a lot of the things that we take for granted for sustenance of life, such as the life-giving elements.
We explored a planet. Not many people get a chance to do that. There were places left to go, many things left unlearned, but nevertheless, we now know so much more about the early history of the Earth and the early history of the solar system than we would have had we never gone, that it has changed our approach to all other space missions and in our interpretation to the data that comes from all of it. Apollo has nothing to hang its head about scientifically. Apollo indeed was an exploration program that could only have been done by human beings. It could only achieve its political goals by having human beings there. And in fact, it could only have achieved its scientific return by having human beings there.
We did become a little bit more philosophical as we ended the Apollo program. It was a major challenge, and it was a challenge and a commitment that the President gave us a number of years earlier. We will not rest on our laurels of having gone to the moon, but we will lead all of mankind into the future. And I truly believe that that is our destiny.
The Apollo 17 mission commander, Captain Eugene Cernan, left NASA shortly after its flight and became a network news consultant on space issues. He is now a very successful businessman based in Houston, Texas. Command Module pilot Captain Ron Evans stayed with NASA for a brief time and was the backup Command Module pilot for the Apollo-Soyuz test flight in 1975. He left NASA in 1977 to enter the private sector of the aerospace industry near Phoenix, Arizona. Sadly, he died of a heart attack at the age of 56 on April 6, 1990. Lunar Module pilot Dr. Harrison Schmitt also stayed with NASA for a brief time, assisting scientists with Skylab experiments, then returned to his home state of New Mexico and entered politics. He became a United States Senator in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, he is now a consultant for several corporations working towards the goal of colonizing the moon to mine helium-3 from the lunar surface. A vast source of energy that may someday be used extensively in fusion reactors on Earth.